16, 2024 meeting of the School Building Committee will come to order. First item on the agenda is approval of minutes from our prior meeting of September 25th. Has everyone received a copy of those? And is there any discussion? Moved by Al Correa. Second by Mike Walsh. Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, so it's 14 in favor, 12 in favor, 2 abstentions. Did I count right? I think I counted right. Okay. Second item is approval of warrant. There's 2 warrants here. One in the amount of $300 for Next Level OPM. We'll deal with that one first. Any discussion on that? Okay, looking for a motion.
Make a motion.
Mitchell City motion. Second, Carmen? Second by Carmen. All those in favor signify saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, and that's unanimous. And there's another warrant in the amount of $307.40
So moved.
for our minutes recorder and everything else that needs to be done. I got a motion by Mike Agagini, Michael, and second by Kevin Dr. McIntyre. Okay, all those in favor? That's also unanimous. All right, next item on the agenda, and the reason we're having this meeting out of sequence, if you will, rather than the last Wednesday of the month, is because on the last Wednesday of this month, October 30th, there are 2 items that are deliverable to MSBA, one of them being the educational profile questionnaire, and the other being the online enrollment projection. So I thought it was reasonable to invite the people responsible for putting these 2 items, these deliverables together, to bring it to us, to if they have any questions, if we have any questions. The first one is the educational profile questionnaire, and Dr. Altman, Josh Altman, could you please talk to us?
Sure. Thanks, Jonathan. Early this morning, you should have received a copy of the full draft of Section 3. We didn't send out a full draft of the entire educational profile questionnaire. Most of what we're going to report on the questionnaire is really just factual documentation of the current state of the building. But Section 3 is where there's a substantive narrative where we're describing our vision for the program and our vision in particular for what we hope to study during the feasibility stage. I don't think it's necessary to go through every detail of the narrative. I want to provide a high-level synopsis and then answer any questions that folks have and receive any feedback that you have. First, it's noteworthy that our intention is to see a building constructed that's going to help us advance teaching and learning. We don't simply want to maintain the status quo, but we want to improve Milford High School through this process. We hope that, number one, a new building is going to support a higher level of student-centered learning. Many of our classrooms today, teachers are locked into a pretty rigid classroom configuration that limits the types of activities they can do because of the shape of the classroom and the limited square footage of the classroom. We hope for classrooms of ample size with furniture that allows for flexible configurations to support all different types of active learning. And most importantly, as you know, we hope to see a new building that can support comprehensive programming, which includes high-quality career and technical education programming to really allow the educational experience for students to become much more personalized and much more relevant. We want students to have a deep menu of options that are meaningful to them so that they can choose a pathway through high school that's going to be aligned to their values and their goals for life after high school. We hope that a new program is going to advance a vision of project-based learning, in particular in our courses in science and technology, engineering, mathematics, and all of our career and technical education offerings. These disciplines require spaces where students can do hands-on, collaborative, constructive projects. We hope that the new building is going to help us advance our vision for an inclusive high school model. This is one where intervention spaces are co-located directly adjacent to classroom spaces, and when students need to leave the classroom to receive specialized instruction, they're only going a short distance away and can hopefully move seamlessly in and out of intervention spaces in their classroom spaces. And we also want to ensure that our substantially separate programs for our students with the most profound disabilities are co-located directly in the major academic zones of the building. We do not want substantially separate programming to be in faraway and distant zones of the building. We want them to be right in the center of the academic spaces. Lastly, we hope that the building can support a vision for a more collaborative type of teaching that we presently offer. In particular, if we're bringing 7th and or 8th graders into the building, our 7th and 8th graders historically in Milford have had a team model where interdisciplinary teams of teachers work with a set cohort of students. That's the norm in the vast majorities of middle schools in this country. And we hope to have a space that can support a team approach, both for students in grade 7 and grade 8 if they move up to the high school, and potentially even for grade 9. There's also some interest in exploring the possibility of seeing the building configured in a manner that can support a house model, where all students in the school are organized into a particular house, and they spend the bulk of their day in core academic subjects that are all located in the same house. Again, this is not an idea that we are committed to at this stage. It's an idea that we hope can be studied and explored during the feasibility stage. As you know, during the feasibility stage, we hope to study 6 different variations on Milford High School. One set is a conventional academic program. That's how I would describe our program today. And there's another set under a comprehensive academic program where we have both all of our conventional academic offerings plus 5 to 7 Chapter 74 career and technical education programs that we've discussed in recent meetings. And under those 2 major headings, there's 3 variations under each. One is a grade 7 through 12 configuration, one is a grade 8 through 12 configuration, and one is a grade 9 through 12 configuration. With respect to the core spaces, for those of you who had a chance to review the narrative, there's a lot in there. I just want to speak at a very high level about some of the different options that we hope to explore in the feasibility study with respect to the core spaces. As I just mentioned, we hope that we can explore the possibility of organizing the academic spaces in the building into teams and or a house model, as opposed to a conventional departmental model. And so we'd like to explore both, a building design that supports a departmental organization to the building, but also a building model that can support a team and or house model configuration of the space. And then again, we hope that our core spaces can be designed in a way that's going to support the highest level of inclusive instruction possible by having intervention spaces co-located with core classroom spaces, and to have our substantially separate special education programs located right in the heart of the building. And then lastly, and this is something that James spoke to recently, and I want to highlight this again, particularly for community members who aren't familiar with the site. The current Milford High School campus not only supports Milford High School, but other central functions for the Milford Public Schools. We house our Shining Star Preschool Center at the site, and we also host a number of central office and district-wide offices at the Milford High School campus. And so we call that out in the educational, in this narrative for the plan, and wanting to ensure that our preschool remains on site, has a separate secure entrance that is segregated from the high school building with secure access points so folks can't enter the preschool from the interior zones of the high school without authorization. And similarly, we hope to have whatever central office and district level offices that are maintained on site, we hope that those are located in a way that provides for separate access to the public so they're not coming in and out of the high school to access those district level offices. So again, a lot more in the narrative than what I presented, but let me sort of pause there at that high level, and happy to speak to in more depth to anything I just mentioned verbally or anything that you read about in the draft version that was sent out this morning.
I guess I made just one comment in terms of those other uses that are there, central office, Shining Star, the pre-K. Would they also look at, because I think it may be appropriate to look at multiple buildings on the same site, so in other words, taking those things and still having them on the site, but perhaps in a separate building where they, all those separate entrances and all those things could be perhaps more easily incorporated into the final design. And you may be able to answer that question if that's a possibility or not.
Yes, thank you. It is. That would be something that the designer would look at. They'd look at what would be really the best option. But in terms of the MSBA and their reimbursement, that's where the angle they come from. The existing pre-K is not affected. It should be part of the program because we've been stating it. And so whether it's a separate building or whether it's a part of the complex, that's that part.
Absolutely.
I'm just going to reiterate though, it's their rule. The district offices are not going to be, they can be part, and they are going to be part, it sounds well. We presume they're going to be part. They won't be reimbursed on, but they can certainly, so they can, same thing, they can be part of the complex, they can be a separate building on the site. That part doesn't matter.
Anyone else? Michael?
Yeah, Eamon, you're a teacher in the current building. I want to know your thoughts on what was presented.
Yeah, I mean, with the 7th and 8th grade models, would that be like a 7 to 12 school, a junior, senior high school? Like, would we be absorbing the administration from those grades? Like, I know a lot of that is kind of way down the road with decisions that are yet to be made, but kind of curious how that would work, if they'd be kind of integrated in,
I
or...
can grab that one if you want me to.
Sure, yeah.
I think what we're thinking right now is 7th and 8th grade would be kind of like a separate program within the high school, so they would be,
Like a junior,
I use the
senior.
word segregated, but they'd be segregated from the high school for the most part. There'd be probably a little bit of overlap.
Yeah.
And then we'd probably have the same administrative ratios that we do now.
Okay.
More than likely. And again, we're talking, 5 to 7 years out.
Yeah, and a lot of it's still yet to be determined, so, I
Correct.
mean, it's hard to kind of know at this point, but yeah, that was a question I had with like how that would...
That's my best thinking at this point, but again, I think there's a long road to go.
Anyone else? Do you have any questions of the committee or of James? Or is this, at this point, is this document just got to be proofread one more time and you're done with it?
I think unless members of the committee have feedback for us, I feel comfortable with the narrative at this stage, and I think we're ready to polish it up.
I do have one other question about the house model. Is that kind of intended to be built into the physical design of the building, or is that just kind of like the internal operations of how the building would run, and we would just kind of organize within a traditional like building structure?
Yeah, so my hope is that in the feasibility study, we can explore the possibility of an architecture that supports a house model, and that the house model is not just sort of a method for organizing the administrative functions of the school, but also a way for organizing the space in the school. Some of you have heard me speak of Attleboro High School, which just came online last year, and Attleboro High School has a geographic design that supports a house model, where the houses are located in their own wings of the building. So I'm not ready to say that I think that is the best option for us at Milford High School, but particularly as we look to, and Dr. McIntyre will speak about this in a moment, as we look to a future in which we potentially house many, many more students on site than we do, having an architectural design that can support smaller communities within this very, very large school, I think has some appeal that's at least worth exploring.
Okay. Patrick?
I was watching James nodding as Josh was talking about the architecture supporting a house model. So I'm assuming that's something that you're familiar with?
Not necessarily the house model versus the
Departmental. Team model or departmental.
Yeah, I recall the team model. No, just in general, everything that he was saying was largely correct.
Okay.
Things that we can study. If I may continue, this educational profile questionnaire. This is not. Don't think of it as a one and done. Or like that was a concern of his. Do we have to have all these answers now at this point? And no, this is basically considered a precursor, a rough draft of the real document that we will be having in the feasibility schematic design called the educational plan. And so once you get the OPM on board, once you get the designer on board, they'll be working on the existing additions in the building, but Josh and the superintendent and the staff will be working on the educational plan. And so that will be informing the architecture. So he's really gotten ahead of the curve here and starting to think about how he wants the school to be operated so that he can then pass that over to the designer. And so the designer now has a way to go and study. So just wanted to name those two things. One, we've effectively checked the box with this specific document, but it's also a great jump start to what we will be really going into depth and wanting and needing to figure out for the feasibility and schematic design.
Al?
Josh, part of this process, house model versus departmental model, does it have a review of staffing needs for each? Is there any difference?
No, I don't believe so. I believe it's just two different ways of configuring space and organizing humans. I don't think one requires more humans than the other.
Well, I'm just worried because I've seen towns around us who went out and expanded their schools. faced the funding of the schools and then said we need X amount of additional teachers.
So I do think that it is important to note that with the consideration of a comprehensive model, we could be looking at a significant expansion in staffing to support that. Our current staffing level today would not be adequate to support a school that housed 5 to 7 Chapter 74 programs. We would need additional staff
When you
for
say
that.
significant, if I may, Mr. Chairman, are you talking 5, 10 extra staff, 20, 30?
Sure. So I think if you were to have, let's say, 5 Chapter 74 programs, I anticipate that you would need somewhere between 2 to 3 teachers to staff each of those programs. Some of those positions would be conversions from our current programs. We have some programs now that we hope can be upgraded into Chapter 74 programs, and the teachers that are currently running those programs would become new faculty.
Net 10 or so.
I think if we were to add 7 programs, I think we could be looking at a net in the range of 10 to 12 teachers to support that expanded programming.
So an extra $1 million a year in budget.
I think that's correct.
I just want to make sure.
Minus benefits.
Huh?
You got to include the fringe benefits.
Well, that's what I'm saying, that you figure that salary 70, 80, 20 grand worth of benefits.
Okay.
Am I underestimating it?
Yeah. And Mr. Cree, I would also just remind both the committee and the public that Chapter 74 programs will produce substantial additional revenue to the community. And my understanding at this stage is that the additional funds generated through Chapter 74 approval is adequate to cover both personnel, consumable, and durable expenses in those programs.
I just want to make sure we take into consideration all the expenses.
I want to get clarification on that because we've heard that a couple times now. How is that possible? Because we have schools that are entirely funded by Chapter 74 monies and they still require input from surrounding communities. Like we still have a BVT assessment in Milford despite them being fully funded by Chapter 74. So how is that money going to cover all of the incidental expenses to running the program?
So I don't feel that I can speak with accuracy around the funding model for vocational technical high schools and how Chapter 70 and Chapter 74 monies are combined to fund them. I have Dr. McIntyre, and I'm sure Mr. Correa can speak with great precision about how Chapter 70 and 74 combined can work in a district-based high school. I'm not sure in regional vocational high schools how the funding works.
So what I can say is we can probably give you a little more information, probably at a future meeting. I don't think we have it at our fingertips, and I don't want to give you inaccurate information. I would say let's put it on a future agenda, maybe sometime, maybe over the winter, we can kind of spend some time talking
We
about
don't
it.
need answers today. We got time to.
Absolutely, absolutely. But based on our conversations with some other schools that have moved to a comprehensive model, that, again, it's not a full faculty that we're covering and an administration. It's like, Josh said, somewhere between, 10 to 12 additional positions, which, based on the information I have, I think would more than cover the additional salary costs through like the Chapter 74, like through state funding, basically.
And Mr. City, if I may, I'm not confident at all that I can speak to the way that funding works at the regional vocational technical school. Just to do some simple math, right? If the Chapter 74 funding is approximately $5,000 per student per year, and you enroll 100 students in a shop, that's approximately $500,000 of additional revenue per year. Right? If we're paying 2 teacher salaries to the tune of $200,000, there's $300,000 remaining for consumable and durable expenses to run the program. So I believe that, for Chapter 74s to be fiscally efficient, they need to operate at a certain scale. And I think that's just like any part of sort of public or private budget, right? Is the economies of scale are going to determine the extent to which the project is fiscally efficient. But the comprehensive high schools that I have seen and the administrators that I've spoken to have made it quite clear that the Chapter 74 monies that they receive are not only sufficient to cover their personnel, consumable, and durable expenses, but also help to subsidize other parts of school operations.
I will, as it was suggested, we'll talk about this at a future meeting. So not that it's an assignment, but let's start pulling that together. I'm not sure it should be the November meeting, but the next couple meetings, let's see if we could drill down deeper into that. We'll put it on as an agenda item. Okay. Anything else with respect to the educational profile questionnaire? So I guess with that, we would just finish it up, format it, proofread, whatever. And unless you have some reason to not send it in, let's get it done.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the online online enrollment projection. There was some handouts left, and Superintendent McIntyre, if you would.
Yeah, so let me jump in real quick. So just to give like a broader context, the whole Northeast is losing enrollment is just a general piece, like the population's declining. And that's the same thing is true of Massachusetts. Think of like a big balloon slowly letting air out. Most districts around us are slowly decreasing in student population. Milford is in, I think, like a 1 to 3% group of districts in the state that are increasing population. And I'm going to kind of read this to you because there's a lot of data, but it's going to be relatively quick, and then I'm happy to answer any questions you have. And I do want to say that we had this discussion at the school committee meeting last Thursday, and the school committee voted in the number that I'm going to share with you. I'm going to explain how I got that because I think it's important for this group to understand it as they're out evangelizing in the community. So our enrollment has been steadily increasing over the past decade. This may not be reflected in building permits or new housing complexes completely. I used to say birth rates too, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. Much of our growth is from families moving into the community from other communities within Massachusetts, from other states, and from other countries. Not only has our enrollment been increasing, but the composition of our enrollment has also changed significantly. This has required us to significantly adjust programming and services to meet both the growing student population and the changing needs of our students and families. Additionally, and this is another thing that makes Milford unique, our enrollment can be dynamic within the course of a school year, which is not always captured in the October 1st SIMS data collection, which is the data we send to the state each year about how many students we have. That's why we would like to explore the grade 7 through 12 complex, an 8 through 12 complex, and the current 9 through 12 configuration. And as Josh said, to look at the feasibility of adding Chapter 74 programs under each of these configurations. We're also going to keep the preschool, which is part of the total enrollment number, which is going to be in the high school regardless of the configuration. In 2018, we worked with NESDEC to complete a pre-K through 12 school facilities best educational use study. Within that study were enrollment projections. We also receive enrollment projections from NESDEC annually. These enrollment projections were off significantly because Milford is such a unique community. We have provided an attachment as part of this submission, and Josh was good enough to put this together, and this is this one. I'm going to kind of walk you through that. The color-coded one. NESDEC is, and I want to say this up front too, NESDEC is widely recognized as an expert in enrollment projections. Their methodology is very accurate for most communities. I would say for 97, 98% of communities, they're right on the money. They're within a few students. Al, whenever I go on a show, we joke about how we added one student a year, and that's just been no longer the case for the past 7 to 10 years. Milford's been an outlier for the past decade, and using traditional measures of student enrollment growth or decline has not yielded accurate results. For example, the enrollment projections for K-12 were off by 10% for the 23-24 school year. 14% for grades 7 through 12 for the 23-24 school year, 14.58% for grades 8 through 12 for the 23-24 school year, and if you look at just the high school population alone, it was off by 16.34% for grades 9 through 12 for the 23-24 school year. So that's like an 8-year projection that was off consistently well over 10%. Now this is a new trend. Additionally, the birth rates in the community also not seem to be increasing, but also are increasing over the last several years. And if you look at this kind of the black and white sheet, it gives kind of the birth rates. And these are birth rates of folks who live in Milford. That's the important piece. If you look at 2016, there were 365 total births. In 2021, those rose to 384, 22, 414, 23, 459, and so far through the end of September of 24, which is where I have data, it's 328. And again, that's trending over 400 births again. So we've got 3 consecutive years of 400 births, which is probably the first time that's happened since probably the baby boom. I can't verify that, but that's probably somewhat accurate. This indicates that our kindergarten classes will be increasing in the coming years, and we are already pressed for space across the district, as everybody is painfully aware. And again, the enrollment trends for most districts are slowly declining, as I said earlier. Let me jump to this spot. The district is considering redistricting as part of our feasibility study. Again, we want to explore the 8th and 7th grade as part of the plan for the Milford High School complex. This is going to result in redistricting at both Woodland, Stacy, and Milford High School. The impact on Stacy and Woodland Elementary School and the grade configurations would depend on which option the Milford community and the Massachusetts School Building Authority ultimately agree to as the final project. This could also technically impact our 2 K2 schools as well. Depending on which way we eventually go. And again, we plan to explore these with the career and technical education component. Based on the NESDEC projections from 23-24, which are our most recent projections, which are the second table on the sheet, so the bottom table here. The enrollment in 2028 would be 24-24. Now, I didn't put this in front of you, but they also project birth rates. And in 23-24, NESDEC projected 394 birth rates in 22, 366 births in 23, and 371 in 24. And you can see those are off. The difference is 14.8% in those years. So this is a trend of 3 straight years with likely 400 or more births, which is a significant upward trend for the community. If you account for our increasing birth rates, proposed projects, and there's a number of significant projects that are in the hopper right now in Milford, and Milford's trend of increasing enrollments beyond birth rates, we would need space for additional students. That's why we proposed and the school committee voted for the number to be 2,782 students for the 7 through 12 Milford High School complex model with the preschool, and that's important to say. So the preschool numbers are included in that. Those numbers obviously would jump down by a class if you went 8 through 12 or 9 through 12, and that's reduced by 1 or 2 grades respectively. So that's kind of the background. That's how I got to the number, based on just the differences in not only the enrollment projections, but also the birth rates that we're seeing. So, and I'm happy to answer any questions, people.
Anyone have any questions?
Yeah, I have one.
No?
I may be out of date, but if I remember, between 8th grade and 9th grade, we lost like 50 kids in the Milford school system.
We do.
Because they go to Blackstone, they go to private, they go to charter.
Yep.
This says we lost 2. Is that
where you looking at?
382?
Those are different classes, Al. So those are these are projections for 28, and those projections are incorporating in what they think will be the attrition that
Yeah,
happens.
I'm not concerned with the absolute number of 382 versus 380.
Yeah.
Only losing 2?
No. But that's like, so the 8th grade would have 382 total students. The 9th grade would have 380 students. That's not a progression of kids coming through. Those are 2 separate cohorts of kids.
Okay. Because
Yeah, we do lose anywhere from 35 to 70 kids depending on the year.
every year.
Yeah, that's accurate.
Just quickly to that point, on the MSBA website, and one of their enrollment methodologies is out-of-district enrollment bump with new construction that may encourage district students that previously opted out of district to return. So they take that into account too, which is a good thing.
Which we also saw at Woodland. We experienced that. We had a bump in the people that stayed at Woodland.
So, Mr. Korea, just to that point, because so many of our recently immigrated students that come to Milford High School enter into grade 9, when you track a class as it goes from grade 8 to grade 9, you typically don't see a net loss of 50. So for example, if you look at students that are today in the class of 2028, those are our current 9th graders, right? We have in the class of 2028, and I'm sorry, I'm going back to last year, I beg your pardon. So that'd be the class 2027. The class of 2027, when they hit grade 9, there was 325 students in the class of 2027. The year before, when they were in grade 8, it was 338. So we're not shedding a net of 50 as the students are promoting from 8 to 9. If our high school population was just made up of students that are coming up from Stacy, then you might see that net loss of 50, but our high school population is a combination of students that are coming up from Stacy and recently immigrated adolescents into the community.
So the immigration is what makes the difference.
And to take that even a step further, our churn rate, which means the students coming in and out, is about 9%. So what Josh has described, Dr. Holland's describing, is happening in almost every grade throughout the
Okay, when I saw a net of 2,
yeah. No, you're absolutely right in your thinking, but the game is shifted
I
a
didn't
little bit.
consider that the incoming 9th graders
Offsetting the outgoing.
offset the outgoing.
So how do we get the MSBA to accept our enrollment projection as opposed to the NESDEC enrollment projection?
I'm going to follow up, if I could. Do we have any idea what number MSBA is going to put on this? And is there any way to tell?
We do not. I actually, Jonathan, James, and I were going back and forth over the last week, really, about this. And, we thought that they might have an enrollment that they had targeted for, one version of our project. And I reached out to our contact, who's very great and very responsive, and she said that that's something we discussed at the enrollment meeting in January, which is the next phase of that. And that's just what kind of Patrick is getting to in terms of that's where we kind of hash it out, our number versus their projections.
I mean, I think that's the only relevant question. I mean, all this work is for nothing if no one accepts what it means. So.
And that's why I wanted to kind of go back through and talk about how, and NESDEC's the gold standard. I don't want to my goal isn't to disparage NESDEC. They do an outstanding job. But for communities that are outliers like Milford, it's a very different process, which is why I went back to that 2016 study and I talked about the disparities in the birth rates.
If I can, through the chair, but to your point, even if MSBA doesn't accept our enrollment number, we still have to plan the building on that number. It's just going to impact the reimbursement, right? So, I mean, I would still think that we would have to move forward with a larger number.
Well, I would think it was the position of the school committee to
Hold on, I'm not sure that's true.
No, right. I think maybe you one of the first decisions you make is agreeing on a mutual agreement on that design enrollment. And that's what the architect then runs with, and that's what they designed the whole space for. That they have this big spreadsheet that's basically based on that number, that 2,700 or whatever it is, and okay, you're going to get 44 classrooms. If it's 2,400, you're only getting 42 classrooms. So it is a big decision, or it is a big agreement.
Is there if we're close, great. If we're lower than their number, even greater. But if our projection that we have high degree of confidence in is not commensurate with MSBA's projection, is there an appeal period and negotiation and discussion? How does that work?
There is. It says there is, yes.
So we'll have an opportunity if they come back and say you're off by a factor of whatever, we'll have an opportunity to say, here's how we got our numbers.
But we can't pay extra. It's not like they say 44.
No.
And we say 47, we'll pay for the extra 3 rooms.
That's a more direct way of asking that question.
We knew what you meant.
And it's a good question, but no, they really, everything on their system is predicated on the design enrollment and then the associated space, because now you're getting into, okay, is the building efficient? And they're looking for that 85% classroom efficiency. So if you're building over that, they just...
Can you explain that?
Calculation breaks down.
James, can you just explain that concept briefly? Because I think that's good for these folks to know, particularly with a secondary school.
Sure. No, the MSBA doesn't like... one of the things that, one of the real side effects of the MSBA is, they don't want to pay for dormant space, wasted space. So, we all grew up where every teacher had a classroom that was her classroom. That was her office. That was where she was. And, well, she needed a planning period, so where would she plan? Or, and so she would plan in that room. And so, well, that room that can handle 25 kids is now sitting dormant, and they think they can make a better efficiency out of that. So what they've done is teachers don't own a classroom per se, and they have planning areas where they can go. So that classroom can get utilized. Basically, if there's 8 periods in a day, it can be used 7 out of 8 or 6 out of 7, whatever the 85% is. I don't remember the more for the math people. But so that's what they're focusing. They don't want wide corridors. They're also looking at the gross square footage. So they look at the net versus the gross, and they allow like a 1.5 factor. And they're looking at that. If you want grand hallways, that impacts that, and then so they don't allow you to overbuild. Is what I'm trying to say. Even with Woodland, we were. Again, a side effect of this efficiency is where do you store stuff? You have a need to store things, but I don't know how it's been at Woodland actually. But
not great.
Okay, well there we go. But that's part and parcel for the program is they're very limiting. So. I hope that helps with any ideas of, we can't overbuild though. And the best we can do then is fight as hard as we can for this design enrollment number, because everything is predicated on that afterwards.
That's right.
So I think it's reasonable to state at this point that we're going to have a disagreement with the MSBA over enrollment.
Don't know.
So I guess I'd like to know a little bit more about the appeals process, and if there are public documents that we can see what a successful appeal looks like, so we can be prepared if we have to have this disagreement.
Good idea.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, just quickly into your point where how do you, I guess, counter NESDEC to, and part of the methodology too is they are saying that upcoming housing developments and student migration patterns. So, as Dr. McIntyre says, we have the data on the student migration, because we're seeing that influx throughout the year, and then we know that there are, in a sense, 40B projects on our, proposed throughout our town. So again, that's more defense on why those NESDEC numbers were off and potentially could increase even more. So again, those are some points that we need to keep in mind.
Yep.
I think we also have to pay attention to if the numbers are increasing as a result of immigration, and they have, whether it's language issues or whatever, that affects our reimbursement rate too, I believe, as far as who the student body is.
I don't know. I don't think so in that case.
What affects the reimbursement rate?
There could be several. There's a million things almost.
Okay, but
I don't think you don't get any additional if there's additional ESL or anything like that.
Jonathan, are you talking Chapter 70?
Chapter 70.
That's different from this, though. Chapter 70 is operational budget.
No, I'm saying, I'm talking non-Chapter 74.
Right.
Just regular education. The number of free lunch, those factors go into
that goes into
the
your
reimbursement rate.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Yes, that already went into that. That created the 78.39.
But is that subject to change as we go through the projected enrollment and the projected demographic?
Not. It is subject. It is, believe it or not, it is actually subject to change because it will be updated once you sign right before the schematic design. You sign the agreement. Then, so 2 years from now.
The point is that we could have increased costs as a result of the student body demographic, and that will play into presumably the reimbursement rate.
Yeah.
when we finally get to that point.
They will reevaluate the 7839.
And we're a hair under 70% high needs right now, which is, high needs is,
How do you get to 100%? That's the question.
well, but it's 70% of our students.
That's where we
either-
start.
yeah,
We start at 100.
Economically disadvantaged,
Right.
student with special needs, or an English
Right.
learner, or some combination thereof.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, we really, though, like, the state just too fundamentally changed all of the housing zoning through that new ADU accessory bylaw. So, like, we really, in my opinion, have to push and err on the side of the highest enrollment number possible, because we are going to be closer to that number.
No
than we
question,
are.
no question.
And I feel, I look at these numbers and I want to apologize. I'm responsible for 2 of these births, which occurred in the last few years. But, you know, it's going to be tough with all the new housing changes and everything else in the town.
I think honestly, we're going to be faced with the same situation we did with Woodland. The day we turn the key, the building's already at max capacity. And I think that's.
And you're not going to turn this key until 2030 or 2031.
Right.
It's a long time from now.
I think the biggest thing is the paradigm shift. I mean, we always use Laurelwood and Hopedale as the model, that the school bus would show up and out of the whole complex, 2, 3 kids would get on the bus, because you didn't have kids in 1 and 2 bedroom places.
That shifted.
Now, all of a sudden, with, what did I hear last night, some of the new rental units are $3,000 a month, but it's at least $1,500 a month for an apartment in Milford. 2 bedroom, you're getting 2 kids.
Right.
Yeah, but now I can, according to the state, I can legally finish out my basement and rent it to a family of 4.
Well, we just have coming up on the warrant for town meeting, the extra dwelling, and that's going to add.
Sure.
Because as everybody said, these tiny houses or 900 square foot houses.
That's not us, that's the state. That's effectively just putting us
that's coming.
in line with the state.
Yeah, but Joe, my point is, we have no control.
Yeah, no, we
It's not
don't,
a Milford
but
thing.
that was just to give the town some control over what the state already mandated.
Sure.
What we're doing from a planning point of view makes sense, but my point is, it's going to get worse as
We're gonna
far
see
as
kids.
numbers, because
Absolutely.
these small houses that before you'd say 900 square feet, you'd never have a kid.
Yeah, I mean, it's, in any of it, it's tough to predict, though, because you've still got the overriding that's going on behind all of this, which is the fact that almost all of New England is losing population. So where does that finally come to an end? And no one knows that. I mean, who the hell knows?
That's a
And
good- that's a
the one that's
million-dollar
going to
question.
drive a lot of stuff, is there's a significant amount of people that are leaving. And the fact is, the state and all their good intentions, shall we say, of doing this may actually even drive other people out, because they don't want to be involved with that type of situation where all of a sudden, you know, I had a single family house and my neighbor's got a rental situation with a bunch of people. That may drive people out too. You don't really know. I mean, to me, the thing in terms of sending anything to them that if it were me, I would think we'd want to show is NESDEC really hasn't predicted Milford for, you're telling me, close to 10 years, and we want to show them that they haven't predicted it right on 10 years. Don't tell me you're going to use NESDEC's number, because you got to be smart enough to know that isn't the right number.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm including all this analysis,
Yeah.
which is why I shared that with
Yeah,
everybody.
and that's where I think you got to go. If they're bullheaded enough to say, oh, well, we're going to use their number, that makes no sense to me whatsoever. When you've got not 1 year, but a number of years that they haven't done it right yet. And that, again, that's not a reflection on them. I understand why it's happening.
So what I'm hearing is get the biggest number you can defend and be prepared to defend it.
And I think that's where we are right now.
That's right. Okay, so Kevin, do you need anything else from us? Are you this ready to go?
This is ready to go. You know, and there's one other piece we're putting in with this Chapter 74, which we've already talked about.
Sure.
So all 3 of those are probably going to go in next week.
So it's due on the 30th. Let's spin it up to get it in the 29th. No reason to.
No, we're gonna get it in early.
No, once it's in early, you can't change anything. Reread it the 28th and send it in the 29th.
We'll be good.
My free advice. Okay, next item on the agenda, which will be a standing agenda item, is capital maintenance plan discussion. I know there's been a lot of effort put into the prior 2 items. Are we doing anything else with capital maintenance with respect to how we get more reimbursements?
Yeah, so that's probably about, I'd say 70 to 80% done. We've got two things left to do on that piece. One thing we have to include is a maintenance plan. And as part of the maintenance plan, MSBA has best practices for maintenance. And we're going to go through and make sure we highlight all the best practices that we currently do in Milford that are, and make sure it's incorporated into that plan. The other thing, and James can probably speak to this a little more eloquently than I can, and I forget what the actual title of it's called, but there's like, you basically have to rate like the facilities in the different areas of your facilities. So like,
They call it an index.
Index, thank you. Thank you. I couldn't come up with a word. But yeah, it's a maintenance index or facilities index. And basically it's like your plumbing, your HVAC, your all your major systems, your infrastructure. And we have this already on a spreadsheet. And basically the subcommittee of the school committee, as well as our facilities director, Carlos Pena, and I are going to go through it and kind of give ratings to all these pieces because we have the condition. We just have to put a rating connected to it. I don't think that's going to be all that difficult, but those are really the two last steps of that process, and I can probably present more formally on it.
What's the date that's due?
That's, I don't have that at my fingertips.
January
Yeah, that's not until January.
January 28th.
Okay, we got plenty of time. Just want to keep it with heightened awareness.
But I'd say mostly complete, and I think I can do a more detailed presentation on that at a subsequent meeting.
Pardon the naive question, but what's the point of an index? I mean, tell me that our boilers aren't really doing great, we're going to replace them anyway. What's the logic?
You only have a certain amount of money to spend every year. What are you going to spend it on? So it's supposed to help you rate and figure out which item you're going to tackle first, second, third. That's it.
Well, we're doing a new school, basically, so we're going to have...
This is for the entire district, though. They're looking at the
Oh,
district.
the whole, so
Yeah.
it's really...
Do we do a good job maintaining
Yeah, I
our
would
stuff?
say, okay, that makes sense. They're rating us on how have we done in the past.
Right.
And what is our planning like for the future? So we've got the capital
Okay,
planning that
so
we
it's not
do.
the high school, it's the whole district.
Yeah, the capital planning that we do as well as this index.
And that's good. There's a lot of communities that actually really do not do a nice job with this.
Right.
So, and that's why they're looking at that information. I would suspect, having worked around some of these boards and committees, that Milford probably does a better job than a lot of the smaller surrounding communities on some of these things. So,
Patrick?
Doing this gives us the potential to raise this by a point and a half, right? For reimbursement. I think you said-
0 to 2. So yes.
Yes, you said last time we could potentially max out at 1.7, right?
No, you.
Well, but
you
just
should get
based
to
upon
2.
what you had seen, what you'd evaluated, and what you'd worked on so far, I believe you said about 1.7, so that's a pretty significant reimbursement. I mean,
Yes, yes, it is. And that was without the creation of the finalizing of this index.
Oh, yeah, and I remember you guaranteeing you give us a 2, so.
I remember that too. It's in the minutes.
All in favor?
Motion, okay. All right. Anything else on capital maintenance plan discussion? Next item is school committee update. If there's anything to update.
The education plan was the update.
Okay, awesome. Any old business? Any new business? And time for a motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn. Second. McIntyre. And who was the second? Mitchell City. All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
When's our next meeting?
It should be the end. I'm going to look at this.